Rebecca Mitchell stood alone on the weathered front porch of her grandmother's old farmhouse, watching the Montana sky melt into swirls of purple, orange, and soft gold. The silence was thick, the kind only found in places where neighbors were miles apart, and time seemed to slow down. 2 months ago, she had left the constant buzz of Seattle behind, a 6-figure marketing job, corporate meetings, and traffic that never stopped, to start over in the house she used to visit every summer. As a child, the adjustment hadn't been easy. Nights were long, days were quieter than she liked to admit, and though the air was cleaner and the stars brighter, something still felt missing. Until now. It was the sound that caught her attention first, the faint rustle of movement near the tree line just beyond her yard. Rebecca squinted into the dusk. A shadow emerged, lean and cautious. A dog. No, not just any dog, a German shepherd, large and regal though clearly underweight. His ribs pressed against a matted coat dulled by dirt and days without food. But his eyes were firelight. Amber, intelligent, watchful. Rebecca took a step forward instinctively, then paused. The dog had stopped too. They studied each other in the stillness. "Hey there," she called gently, her voice barely louder than the breeze. The shepherd didn't move, didn't growl, didn't run. He simply observed like he was deciding whether she was friend or foe. He had no collar. A thin scar split his right ear. Rebecca turned and walked inside the house, returning moments later, with a bowl of water and leftover roast chicken. She placed them at the bottom of the porch steps and backed away. "It's okay," she said softly. "You look hungry." The dog remained frozen. 1 minute. 2. Then, slowly, he moved. Every step deliberate, silent. He never broke eye contact, even as he reached the food. He drank first, then devoured the meat in clean, efficient bites. When finished, he licked his lips, glanced at her once more, and without a sound, turned and vanished back into the trees. Rebecca exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. That night, as crickets chirped and the wind whispered against the siding, she placed a clean bowl filled with kibble and fresh water at the same spot. "Just in case," she murmured, half to herself, half to the night. But as she turned to go inside, she found herself pausing, just for a heartbeat, gazing back at the tree line. There was something about him, a dog that moved like a soldier, watched like a guardian, and disappeared like a ghost. She didn't know his name, she didn't know his story, but she felt it deep down. Their paths had crossed for a reason. The sound came just before sunrise. Scratch, scratch. Then a low, almost conversational whine. Rebecca jolted upright in bed, blinking at the faint blue light leaking through the curtains. The clock on her nightstand read 6:17 a.m. For a long second, she lay still, unsure if the noise had been real or dreamt. Then it came again, scratch, scratch, heart ticking faster. She crossed to the window and peered through the side light of the front door. There he was, the German shepherd from the night before, standing tall and expectant on her porch. The bowl she'd left out was empty, but this time, he hadn't come for food. He had something in his mouth. Rebecca opened the door cautiously. The dog took a small step back and gently set the object down on the porch, a mud-caked, worn leather wallet. He nudged it toward her with his nose and sat, watching her, with those keen, ember-bright eyes. Curious, Rebecca crouched and picked it up. The leather was soft and well-used, waterlogged from morning dew and streaked with dirt. She opened it carefully. Inside, she found a few crumpled bills and an old, faded driver's license. The photo showed an elderly man with soft eyes and a weathered face, Albert Henderson. The address listed was only 5 miles down the road. She looked up. "Where did you get this?" The shepherd didn't move, but tilted his head slightly as if considering her question. Then, after a pause, he looked toward her driveway, then back at her, then the driveway again. "You want me to follow you?" she asked slowly, a single wag of the tail. Rebecca hesitated only a moment before turning back inside. 5 minutes later, she re-emerged, dressed, clutching her keys, phone, and the damp wallet. The shepherd stood waiting, his body alert like a guide ready to escort her through the unknown. "Okay," she said, unlocking the passenger door. "Let's go." Without hesitation, the dog leapt inside. As they drove down winding, frost-edged country roads, Rebecca couldn't help glancing sideways. The shepherd sat upright, ears forward, posture steady like a seasoned traveler. Every now and then he looked at her, as if checking to make sure she was still on board. The strangeness of the moment wasn't lost on her. She was following a dog who had shown up out of nowhere, carrying a stranger's wallet. And somehow it all felt right. "You're not just any dog," she said quietly. "You've done this before, haven't you?" The shepherd didn't answer, of course, but his eyes softened at her voice. 15 minutes later, the GPS confirmed what the dog already seemed to know. They turned onto a gravel driveway flanked by tall pine and a leaning wooden mailbox that read Henderson in faded paint. The moment the car crunched onto the driveway, the shepherd's demeanor changed. His body tensed, not in fear but recognition. His ears pricked, his breathing slowed. Rebecca parked near an old farmhouse with peeling white trim and a rusted pickup in the yard. Before she could unbuckle, the front door creaked open. An elderly man stood in the threshold, leaning heavily on a cane. His eyes landed on the dog in the passenger seat. He froze. "Ranger." His voice cracked on the name, equal parts disbelief and desperate hope. The shepherd responded with a soft whine, pawing once at the window. Rebecca reached across and opened the door. In an instant, the dog bounded out but stopped just short of the man. He sat obediently, tail sweeping the dust, his gaze locked on the figure before him. The man stepped forward slowly, eyes welling. "My God, is it really you?" Ranger whined again, inching closer until he could press his head gently against the man's thigh. The cane wobbled as the old man dropped to one knee with effort. His hand trembled as it found the dog's neck. "I thought I'd lost you, old friend." Rebecca stepped forward, still holding the wallet. "I think he brought you this," she said softly. The man looked up, stunned. "My wallet. I lost it 3 days ago out by the fence line." He took it from her, shaking his head in disbelief. "You found it, didn't you, boy? Even after everything, you're still looking out for me." He rose with effort and gestured toward the porch. "Please, come sit. Seems I owe you both my thanks." Ranger circled once at the man's feet and lay down, his job, at least for now, complete. Rebecca followed them up the steps, heart still trying to catch up to the whirlwind of the last hour. She watched the two reconnect with silent reverence. And deep inside she felt it. The mystery wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The porch creaked beneath their feet as Rebecca settled into a faded rocking chair. The sun had risen just high enough to light the peeling white paint of Albert's farmhouse and cast long morning shadows across the yard. Ranger lay between them, his body still and ears relaxed, but his eyes never strayed far from the man who sat just a few feet away. Albert held the wallet in his hand, turning it over like a relic from another time. 3 days, he murmured mostly to himself. "I must have dropped it along the back fence when I was checking damage from that storm." Rebecca looked over. "He found it and brought it to me." Albert chuckled under his breath, but it was tinged with awe. "Still doing his job, even after everything." She leaned forward. "Can I ask what happened?" Albert's gaze drifted across the yard toward the distant tree line. "It was 4 months ago, mid-April. The storm came out of nowhere, straight line. Winds, thunder like cannons. Lightning took out a big pine just near the property line, crashed through part of the old fence." Ranger's ears twitched. "I was inside when I heard the crack. Thought a truck hit the house. I went out and the fence was gone. Trees were down. And Ranger, he just bolted." Rebecca frowned. "He ran away?" Albert's eyes softened. "He's never done that before." "But the lightning, the noise, it must have triggered something in him. Maybe a memory, maybe instinct. He ran toward the trees. I chased as far as I could, but..." He tapped his cane gently on the porch boards. This old leg can only take me so far. Rebecca noticed, perhaps for the first time, the prosthetic. A faint metallic click accompanied each small shift in Albert's position. I searched for days. Flyers, local shelters. Drove out past the ridge every evening. Nothing, no sign. After a month, I had to assume. His voice trailed off. Rebecca finished the thought for him in silence. Albert cleared his throat. But he didn't forget me, or his training. She looked down at Ranger. He's trained? Albert nodded. Police originally, passed every task with flying colors. But they said he was too gentle for field work. Washed him out. He smiled faintly. Lucky for me. How did he come to you? Veterans program. I stepped on a mine in 71, Vietnam. Did okay for most of my life. But after 70, your balance betrays you. He was paired with me 5 years ago. Changed everything. He knows how to guide, fetch things, pull my wheelchair if I need it. And more than that, he knows me. Albert leaned forward, resting a hand on Ranger's broad back. Some days he knows what I need before I do. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, letting it settle. The bond between them wasn't just owner and pet. It was something woven through pain, healing, and mutual need. He came to me like he was on a mission, she said. Showed up out of nowhere. Never barked, never begged. Just watched, waited, like he was judging if I was someone who could help. Albert smiled. He's always had good instincts about people. But how did he know where to find me? Albert gestured toward the woods. After the storm, the power company came in. Cleared out about an acre of trees to replace the downed lines. Changed everything. What used to be thick forest is now open trail. For a dog navigating by scent and memory, it might have looked like a new world. Rebecca nodded. Maybe he got turned around. Maybe, Albert said. Or maybe he found someone who reminded him of home. Silence again. Ranger shifted slightly and laid his head across Albert's foot. The movement was simple, but it anchored the moment. Rebecca looked away, blinking. He's amazing. Albert didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was low. When he vanished, I didn't just lose a dog. I lost the part of myself that could still live alone, still feel safe. It's hard to explain, but Ranger, he made it possible to stay in this house, this life. Rebecca's throat tightened, and then he showed up at my door with a wallet. Albert laughed softly. He always was clever. Knows how to get things done. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. An understanding that neither had voiced, but both felt. Rebecca had left behind a life of meetings and manicured plans only to feel unmoored. Albert had been anchored too long until the storm ripped his stability away. They had both been surviving, but not quite living, and somehow this dog, this quiet, watchful guardian, had led them to each other. Rebecca stood brushing the edge of her jeans. You said earlier you thought he was gone for good. What made you give up hope? Albert looked down at his hand resting on Ranger's head. It wasn't that I gave up. It was that I didn't know where to hope anymore. Her voice was barely a whisper. And now? Albert looked at her, then at Ranger. Now I remember. They sat for a while longer, letting the morning stretch around them. No more words needed. Just the steady rhythm of Ranger's breathing, and the whisper of wind through the trees. The storm had separated them, but kindness, and something deeper, had brought them back. And in that stillness, Rebecca understood something she hadn't before. Maybe she wasn't lost either. The moment the sleek sedan rolled onto the gravel driveway, Ranger lifted his head. Albert followed the sound, a shadow crossing his face. That'll be my daughter, he said, the weight in his tone impossible to miss. Rebecca watched from her seat on the porch as the car parked beside the barn. A well-dressed woman in her 50s stepped out, her heels instantly collecting dust. Her gaze swept the yard, then locked on the German Shepherd at Albert's side. She froze. Dad, she called out, voice cracking between surprise and caution. Is that? Before she could finish, Ranger stood and moved to stand between her and Albert. Not aggressive, just alert. Protective. Albert placed a hand gently on the dog's head. "It's okay, boy." The woman slowly approached, her purse clutched tightly in both hands. "His name's Ranger," Albert said. And yes, he found his way home. Marie stopped a few feet away, clearly overwhelmed. "I thought he was gone." Albert nodded. "So did I." She looked at Rebecca, confusion and curiosity mingling in her eyes. "This is Rebecca," Albert offered. "Ranger brought her into all of this." Marie's tone softened slightly. "He brought you my father's wallet?" Rebecca nodded, and then guided me here, like he knew where I needed to be. Marie sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Dad, we've talked about this, about safety. You're out here alone. If you fall, I manage," Albert interrupted gently. "Especially now. But what if he runs off again?" Ranger tilted his head slightly as if offended by the suggestion. "He won't," Albert said firmly. "And I'm not leaving my home." Marie looked torn. Her concern wasn't just worry, it was love, complicated by helplessness. Rebecca shifted in her seat. "I might have an idea." Both Hendersons turned toward her. "My grandmother's place," she began slowly, "has a caretaker's cottage. About 100 yards from the main house. It's small but private, self-contained." Albert narrowed his eyes. "Go on." "I've been thinking about renovating it anyway. But if you wanted, you could live there. Independent but close. Enough that I could help if something came up." Marie stared at her. "You'd offer that to a stranger?" Rebecca glanced at Ranger. "Let's just say I trust his judgment." Albert blinked. Once. Twice. Then something in his shoulders shifted. The weight eased. "That might just work," he said quietly. Marie folded her arms. "We'd need to talk about accessibility, modifications, lease terms." "Of course," Rebecca said. "But the bones are good. There's plenty of space for Ranger." Albert looked down at the dog, then back at Rebecca. "You sure about this?" Rebecca nodded. "Yeah, I think we all need this." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between the three of them. A fragile thread pulled taut by circumstance, gently tied by compassion. 3 people and 1 dog, starting over, together. Rebecca threw herself into the renovation with a quiet determination she hadn't felt in years. The caretaker's cottage behind her grandmother's house had stood empty for nearly a decade, a forgotten remnant of a different era. But now, it was becoming something more, something necessary. Albert visited often, offering advice and lending whatever help he could manage. Despite the prosthetic that slowed his step, he moved with purpose. He had opinions about everything, from the width of the doorways to the kind of lever-style handles that would be easiest for his hands to grip. Rebecca took notes, sketched designs, and tried things out. And always, Ranger was there. The German Shepherd treated the renovation like a mission. He inspected every delivery, sniffed every new fixture, and even sat silently beside the plumber, growling once when the man tried to install a round knob instead of a lever. "Smart dog," Albert had chuckled. "Knows what I need better than most humans." What started as a casual offer from Rebecca was transforming into a sanctuary. For all of them, the cottage came to life. New insulation went in. Windows were replaced. The creaky floorboards were reinforced. Rebecca spent long days covered in paint and sawdust, but she didn't mind. In fact, she felt more alive than she had since leaving Seattle. Albert, too, seemed revitalized. He'd taken to walking the perimeter of the property each morning with Ranger beside him, sometimes stopping by with stories from his service days or bits of local gossip. Rebecca found herself looking forward to their visits, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine affection she hadn't anticipated. Marie began to visit more frequently, at first out of cautious concern, but over time something shifted in her. She watched her father with new eyes, saw how he moved more confidently, how his eyes lit up when he discussed plans for the space, or when Ranger gently nudged his cane into place. "It's like he's 10 years younger," she confided to Rebecca one afternoon as they painted the cottage walls a warm eggshell white. "I didn't think he'd ever be this light again. Rebecca smiled. Sometimes the right place isn't just about walls. It's about people. By early July, the cottage was ready. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, bright, and tailored exactly for Albert's needs. Rebecca even installed a simple alert system, buttons throughout the cottage that could notify her phone in case of emergency. The day of the move, the sun shone bright over the Montana hills. Albert stood in the doorway of his new home, looking around with misty eyes. Ranger sat beside him, tail thumping gently. "This'll do just fine," Albert said, his voice rough with emotion. They celebrated that evening with a simple dinner on Rebecca's porch. Marie brought dessert. Ranger lay at Albert's feet, eyes half-lidded but alert, always watching. As fireflies blinked across the darkening yard, Albert raised a glass of lemonade. "To Ranger," he said. "The best matchmaker a man could ask for." They laughed, but Rebecca felt the truth in his words settle deep. Over the next few weeks, the rhythm of life on the shared property found its own gentle tempo. Rebecca returned to some freelance work, helping neighbors with tax prep, tech issues, even designing logos for local businesses. Word spread that the city girl who moved into the Mitchell house was more than capable. Albert began volunteering at the local Veterans Center. He and Ranger would visit twice a week, demonstrating service dog techniques and simply offering conversation to men who, like Albert, had seen too much and held too much inside. Marie still worried, but less. She joined them for Sunday dinners, helped in the garden, even coordinated a supply drive for the local shelter. One night as they all sat watching the stars, she leaned over to Rebecca. "You didn't just help my father," she said. "You helped me too." Rebecca looked out across the land that had once felt like exile and now felt like home. "He helped me first." And it was true. The quiet strength of Albert, the loyalty of Ranger, even Marie's gradual shift. Each part of this new life had sprung from one moment of kindness, an offered meal, a hesitant connection, a dog on a porch, the eye. Ripple had become a wave, and none of them would ever be the same. Sunday mornings had taken on a sacred rhythm. Rebecca sat on her porch with a mug of coffee, watching Albert and Ranger make their slow, steady loop around the property. The German shepherd walked just a step ahead of the old man, ever watchful, ever steady, like a soldier on patrol beside his commander. Marie's car pulled into the gravel drive, dust swirling behind her like mist. She stepped out carrying a manila envelope and a curious smile. "I found something I thought you should see," she said, handing the envelope to her father. Albert opened it slowly. Inside was an old photograph, faded, yellowed by time. It showed a much younger Albert in uniform, kneeling beside another German shepherd, one with the same intelligent gaze, the same strong build, the same white blaze on his chest. "Rex?" Albert whispered. "My patrol dog in Vietnam." Marie nodded. "You always said he was the only one who truly understood you back then." Albert didn't speak right away. He stared at the picture like it had just breathed. "When they matched me with Ranger, I couldn't believe the resemblance. I thought maybe life was giving me something back I never expected." Rebecca looked at him. "Do you think it's a coincidence?" Albert's smile was quiet. "Some bonds, they outlive explanation." Ranger, resting at his feet, let out a soft chuff as if affirming the thought. And then it happened. Ranger's head lifted, ears alert. He stood up, eyes fixed on the tree line. All three humans followed his gaze. From the edge of the woods, another figure emerged. A younger German shepherd, thinner, more cautious, but walking with the same proud bearing. His ribs showed. His coat was dull, but his eyes burned bright. "Well, I'll be," Albert whispered. Ranger looked up at him, waiting. At Albert's slight nod, Ranger trotted across the yard, calm and sure. He met the newcomer gently, nose to nose, no aggression, only welcome. The younger dog hesitated, then followed him. They returned together, side by side. Rebecca set her mug down slowly. "Looks like the story's not over yet," Albert chuckled. "No, ma'am, another visitor, another beginning. The circle of kindness had expanded again.